Welcome back, everybody. Thank you again for joining me here in Vintage Story. My wife and I's forever world continues to grow, but I'm not showing off any of the newer stuff yet. That is way down the pipeline. Today's focus is going to be on a building that technically was already shown off in the original base tour, but has since been relocated, much like the textile working area, into its own new fancy building. So this was done, I feel like this building was done a couple months ago, honestly. The backlog of stuff to show has taken this long to finally showcase it. So that's what this video is going to be. It's going to be my typical, rambling case study approach. So again, I'm going to try to pay attention and have chapters present. That way you guys can skip around as necessary and just take what is useful. But I will just be going through the exterior of the building and then also the interior and explaining why I built it the way I built it, the processes that are happening in the building, maybe some historical context, the reasons why I picked the colors I did and the location and stuff like that. And hopefully you guys will be able to take something from my ramblings and apply it to your own builds. And if you guys have any kind of tips or tricks that are, probably up my alley, please feel free to put those down in the comments. I love reading that stuff. I was even having a problem in my last video where I was talking about the sterile white lighting of the lanterns and how I wanted something cozier, and somebody brought up that apparently in this game you can change the color of the glass in the lanterns. I didn't know that. You can get red tinted or pink or purple or smoky tinted glass, brown. That's opened up a whole volume of options for me, so I can't wait to explore those. So if you guys have any expertise, either just from you guys watch somebody else on their video or you yourself have encountered a problem and came up with a solution, please feel free to share that with me down in the comments. I don't really use mods. I do use creative here and there to make things easier and time friendly for me and my wife. So your mod suggestions are definitely welcome, especially for other people in the comments. But if you have any in-game vanilla suggestions for how to approach things, I am all ears for sure. So thank you guys for tuning in. Again, long intro. I apologize. The Midwestern Goodbye is probably going to be just as long, if not longer. So let's go ahead and mosey on over to our leatherworking space, shall we? All right. You guys have been giving me excellent feedback concerning the style and approach to the videos, and have also, a lot of you have been exceptionally kind and have essentially given me permission to do this however the fuck I want. And that's all I needed to hear, baby. So I pretty much want to keep doing it the way I've been doing it. It seems that the stuff kind of falls out naturally, and the lessons do try to reveal themselves, but I will definitely try to be better about pointing them out and tying them in. We seem to have some techniques that keep coming up, so I'll try to reference them as much as possible. But as you can see from the front of the building, you should be able to tell without even my nifty little chiseled sign here, which I think this one's a banger, honestly. I dig this guy. I think if you put your thumb over the fucking sign right now looking at this, you could tell that this does something with hides, right? And of course, obviously the biggest tell is going to be this corner over here to the right of the building. I think this is my favorite part. This build, actually right here, this little chiseled construct was actually shown off on Reddit forever ago, way back when the leather working station was over underneath that windmill back behind me. So this is one of the first things I chiseled. I had people tell me that it looked like it was one of the modded assets, asking what mod it was. This is something I chiseled. I chiseled this guy. I love it. I love using all the different blocks. It's mostly the Dobbs, and then chert, and I believe the black fur is basalt cobblestone. Or cracked basalt, cracked basalt, to give it a little bit of texture, make it seem like fur. But then I just used fan cobblestone to, I think this is actually just regular cobblestone, I apologize. But the cobblestones, fanned or otherwise, make a good substitute for rope textures as long as you use the right colors. But I have him basically just strung up here so you can, skin all the fat and fur and everything off and get a usable piece of leather, which we'll kind of talk about the leather making process here in a second. But this corner's outside, so I wanted to go over it. You can see I have actual functional storage here. I chiseled some chert onto the ground to make it look like the blood is dripped. I've got a bucket of red dye, although the red dye in this game looks very pink. I wish that was a different tone or different vibrancy, different hue, whatever. And then we have a smaller hide, that's the word, damn, over here, hanging up on something where I have chiseled this to be a stand, and then you can just put the Helve Hammer frame on top of it, and I think that goes together pretty well. I think that's a nice ordeal. I could have chiseled the top piece too, but I like taking the in-game assets and mixing them in and throughout the custom stuff that I chisel, because I feel like it creates a melting pot, so to speak, and just kind of sells the whole thing as a piece. Little tiny small animal trough here, just maybe like we catch guts or something, or blood drips into that, and then we got different pelts lying on the ground. The actual bear head pelt that you would use to make like the bear helmet is sitting on the table here, and then we have actual storage again, tool storage. Technically, the knife is what you use to, like, I guess, scrape the soaked hides in the process, in the game anyway. But you could also use an axe. Like, that's a much broader surface area. It has the same cutting edge. You could use an axe to, like, shave all that stuff off. There's also shears here to imply that like you could cut things, like cut the skin or something, shave off the fur. Just some more variety to the actual tools that are being used. And when you're around here, maybe you need the shears for something, or maybe you need the axe to cut up the wood that you're using for the tannins and whatnot. So having the tools here is for eye candy, and also because you might actually fucking need it. And it is relevant tools. I don't just have a wrench sitting here for no reason. But I also have crates stacked up, mostly for decoration. But if we need to store like more firewood or logs or the tannin buckets or something in here, we can definitely do that. And then I use beams and just drew them from up there down to the ground to make it look like there's, you know, a pillar or a beam of wood leaning up against the wall. I think that's another way to break up the grid. Seeing things go at angles, for one, and then also going across multiple blocks, not just horizontally, but vertically, and then going over top of other assets. You know, like that makes it look more grounded. It makes it look busy. Obviously, there's clutter, there's decoration there. But, again, this game is a grid cube-based game. So anything that exist outside of that inherent logic is more immersive to the experience as a versimilus one, and not an experience as a game, if that makes sense. Like, you know, it's a cube game, so seeing that thing go out of there is going against the logic of the game. But because it's logical for things to be able to occupy more than one square in the real world, this makes it more realistic for you. I hope I explained that better the second time around. The front is, this was all mostly an experiment in roofing, like chiseling custom roofs. And if your shape of your building is simple, it's really not too bad. It's very repetitive, but like trying to make the corners and stuff meet and buck into each other and tie in with your gables and all that is very simple if you keep the shape of the building simple. But I did end up with an overhang here, and so I wanted to kind of decorate that by having, I cannot think of what these are called all of a sudden, but like fly rafters, basically, or it's a piece that hangs off the edge, and this is where you nail up your fascia and your facade and gutters and siding and all that stuff in a modern home. These are like your eaves, or the eaves, maybe they're eaves. Maybe I'm dropping the ball on that. Oh, I just noticed this beam is sticking out like a motherfucker, though. I hate that. I thought I placed that correctly. That beam is over top of some creative canopy assets from the trader assets that they added in 122. I wanted, like, it doesn't cover any more than the overhang, but I felt like that looked more interesting than just having this chiseled piece repeat across the whole front. And then I have some timber bracket scaffolding frames right there, and then some iron and ebony plankage towards the bottom above the brick, just to make this, I didn't want it brick all the way around. Basically, I felt like that would be boring, and having some of the wooden and timber and leather stuff in the front makes this feel kind of rustic and old school, not really ancient, medieval maybe. And that mixes in with the otherwise rather industrial feel of having this, 26-degree roof, heavy brick construction, and all the other stuff I'm going to show on the inside here. So I just wanted to mix it up a little bit, and instead of having it brick all the way, I put some wood on the front, but just having boring-ass wooden planks, either going horizontally or vertically, was going to be too boring. And so I just experimented with making it interesting. I'm not a big fan of how this turned out, but, I mean, It's not bad. I don't think it's that bad. There's definitely ways I would do it differently. I think I would cover more of the shingles. I think that perhaps might have been a better move. Use a different piece of wood to go in between these the little bitty beams, the slats that I have coming out to hold up the roof. But I don't know. Tell me what you think. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Is a sentence I'm trying to get at. Right here is really nonsense. I just wanted to put it here with my manhole cover. Giggity. You got to cover your manholes, ladies and gentlemen. Keep your manholes covered. And then the valve, knob, pipe stuff, access point that I've had throughout the whole estate, just to signify, like, hey, we're piping water from the hot springs and the water table and everything throughout the whole system here. And so this is an access point where someone can go down and do maintenance or turn off the water to this building. Over here is where I guess it specifically enters the building to facilitate the plumbing and stuff that I have chiseled on the inside. This is just a fucking bucket. And then over here are the actual barrels, which I have lined up with instructions. That way I don't have to open up the fucking manual every time because I'm stupid and I can't remember every goddamn crafting process in this fucking game. But so I make signs, and you know, having stuff written down is pretty cool. And plus, I think it adds to world building. I wish you could do different fonts or something on the signs, or like when you did a sign, it was like a miniature chisel, and you had access to like actual pixels, like at the level that text is rendered. You know what I mean? And then you can make your own sign, like paint it. That would be cool. There's probably a mod for it, but I feel like every complaint that I have that a mod solves, just understand that I know the mod is there, or I'm sure there's a mod for it, but I wish it was in the game already. But also understand that although I'm griping, I do understand the history of the game's development and what Tyron's going on, like guys is doing, and the roadmap, and I understand their intent. And I'm patient. I just like to bitch. I'm sorry. But I do have signs, is what I'm getting at, on top of these barrels to let you know what the process is. And like I stated in the previous video for the textile shop, this place would also need water and wash bins and stuff to handle the flax and linen. And now that I think about it, I'm kind of mad that cannabis isn't in the game as an alternative for making fiber. Like, we have all these other different food types and varieties of food. There's so many different berries. There's so many different fruit trees. There's so many different grains. But there's only one way to get fabric. That's kind of whack, yo. Like, the term canvas, I'm pretty sure, comes from cannabis. So it's weird that it's not in there. It's an old world crop. I can understand, like, the social implications of having cannabis in the game. But, like, I mean, come on, like hemp is a real world tool. Like, you should be able to make paper and clothes and stuff like that out of hemp. That should be an option. Flax is kind of doing the same shit here, but all the grains do mostly the same shit. So it just seems weird to me that there's such variety everywhere else and not as much variety with the fabric. And even in the same vein, like what we do here with this leatherworking is only one form of leatherworking. I think it's called vegetable tanning. Because we're using plant material with to make the tannin, the acacia and the oak bark you'd really just be using the bark and stuff from the plant or from the tree, and then soaking that to get your tannins. But we just use the whole fucking log. For efficiency's sake, you get 98% more tannin per log if you use the whole log and not just the bark. But over here is storage for the different. I think these are the shaved hides, because once you soak them and then you peel them, they can store forever, and you can just leave them there, and then you can use them for whatever your crafting is. So these are just out there along with the actual buckets of tannin that we keep in the crates. I do have them labeled with a letter, specifically because I had to do it for the different tannins, because you can't really tell the difference, but also because like if I did it for these two, I'd have to do it for all of them. That's why even though these two up here aren't even being used, they also have a label that I've chiseled underneath them on top of the parchment mechanic being attached to the crate. But that's chiseled up in brick just to make the building seem more squat and sturdy, and then also give me some nice framing to trench coat this these stack of crates and make this seem like a more coherent unit. Again, trench coating is when you have multiple separate assets and you would like for them to seem as more one entire coherent unit, like multiple shelves or multiple crates or chests. Instead of being multiple crates or chests or shelves, you want them to seem like they're a cabinet or a wardrobe or a countertop. And so I have dubbed that term trench coating, because otherwise, if you don't put a trench coat on it, you can quite clearly see that they're independent assets. So trench coating is where you put something on all the sides and chisel some stuff to make it look like it's a unit. And I feel like I did pretty good here. It doesn't look like it's a whole piece of furniture, but it looks like it's a custom built storage area and not, 8 crates that I stacked up on against the wall. And then you come around here, technically you need a water source, a permanent water source that you can easily get access to keep filling these up and make these processes. There's no actual pumping of water. There's no plumbing. You have to do this by hand with buckets. So I do have a permanent water source over here in the back of the building that kind of just looks like those wells that, well, we have them on our property, but the wells that you would see at like campgrounds and stuff and like out in public places where you need there has to be for some reason a public water outlet. I think typically they'd have like a hand crank on them, at least the ones that I'm used to, but this one I just put a valve on it because we have valves and stuff already, so it's just simpler for me to chisel, save time, and it communicates the same visual language as having a hand crank on your pump. Giggity. But this is actually just a chiseled chiseled block that the bottom half is missing, and then I chiseled the top to make it look like a hole. Giggity. And then I made it wet. Giggity. And so that's a permanent water source. You can bucket the water out, and it looks like it's just erosion from the water. I thought that was a pretty cool trick. I guess I'll go ahead and swing around the back here. This could have been very boring. I had to put windows because a lot of these early proto-industrial spaces, as I mentioned before, there was no electric lighting at the time, or not very much electrical lighting at least, at the time that we were making the shift from small-ish scale artisanal production into what we would term industrialization. So this proto-industrial aesthetic kind of requires some windows for the open air lighting that you would get. The buildings that Trinity, I believe, runs across in the Matrix opening, where the agents are chasing her. I think you even do it in the Matrix video game. But those buildings that have those weird 45-degree roofs and then they go down, they have windows on the other side of them because that way as the sun goes across, like they're set up and they're built in such a way you're running north or south or east or west or whatever, that way as the sun goes across, you maximize the sunlight going in there while still having a solid roof and not having to use a bunch of glass. I guess you could make a factory a greenhouse with whole glass roofs. And you did see some factories with just pure skylights. But having windows positioned properly to allow natural light in there, one, some of your processes were flammable. You didn't want to have candles and torches and stuff going. Even lanterns pose a fire risk. So having access to many, multiple, or big windows, which big windows historically were hard to do, because making glass in large panes is expensive, time-consuming, and at a certain point was pretty much impossible to make it worth anything. Because of that, you need that natural lighting. So to have multiple windows on this back wall was a way for me to break up what would otherwise be flat. Even though you don't need natural lighting inside this building because they utilize the lanterns, this helps. It helps with the lighting inside. It makes it seem more open as well when you can look out of the building and see the world outside of it instead of just being stuck by 4 walls and a single doorway when you go into a building. So the windows open up the inside of the building while they also break up the boring flat facade of the rear, which again, this is kind of popsicle sticks because typically you wouldn't be focusing at all on the back of this building. But some of my roads do kind of give you a glance at it, and since I especially don't have any landscaping done right here, there might be points where you would look at this. And so having the windows there gives the viewer something to look at. You can also see, because of what I've done on the inside, which I'll talk about when we get to the inside, I needed another layer of bricks on the outside, which really just helped, because then I was able to the logic that I used to make this trench coated, I was able to apply to the other sides and just make the building seem more squat. So this is now, I'll show you in the middle, on the inside, when we get to the middle of this thing, I'll show you why this is important. And I'll also show you why this is important. But I needed to decorate it because it couldn't just be another layer of the same brick. That would have been boring as fuck and replicating the same dead space issue that I was having with this layer. And I can't just put more windows down here. That won't work. So I just chiseled it out and put, I think this is conglomerate dry stone. You could use whatever. You could have used a different color brick. You could have used wood. But I have this logic where I feel like the heavier material needs to be on the bottom, so it would have felt weird to have wood right there to me. Maybe you could have chiseled it, make it look like it's a door that opens. It would have kind of looked kind of like a pizza oven door maybe. But I've seen cellar doors that are kind of like that as well. So that's something I could have done. But that's me talking in hindsight and retrospect and like looking at it. But at the time, it just felt like I needed to chisel in a layer. Like, what is this, a 4 square voxel? I'm going to call that a voxel cube, a single voxel cube, because that's 4 of the voxels put together. That voxel cube, that layer back, and then chiseled and filled that in with the dry stone. And it's a different color, it's lighter, it's still kind of warm, but I don't think it's the same kind of warmth that we get from these different red bricks. And again, I'm using the Clinker bricks because I'm a huge fan of their variety in their shades and contrast, and also it reminds me of the buildings that I have around where I live. So it's just familiar to me, and I like it. And I think it, because of the variety in its shades and contrast, I think it goes well with a lot of the other blocks in the different palettes that you'll use. So Clinker, to me, and I'm not, it sounds like such a slur. I hate saying Clinker by itself, but the Clinker bricks seem to be, to me, the equivalent that I have for ebony, where it's a dark, elegant looking, or like, you know, historical, fancy, artistic color or hue or vibrancy. I don't know what it is, but the dark brick and the dark wood both appeal to me. Maybe that's because of my color blindness, and so they're just stark contrast to most of their other equivalents in the game. Just speaks out to me. It could be that. But if you guys also find yourselves being fans of a specific brick or a specific wood type or shingle color, and you have a reason for it, or you struggle, even if you struggle to articulate a reason, try to articulate it to me. I'd be curious to hear how you guys feel about colors and stuff, especially since I'm colorblind, and I'm presuming, based on math, most of you guys are not colorblind. So that would be interesting. I know you can't see it because of the snow, but this is a red shingled roof, just chiseled at that, what is this, like a 30, 25 degree angle, somewhere around there. Not quite a 45, definitely more of a gradual incline, but I liked it. It gives me some headroom in here without having to have too much dead space. I guess I could have just replicated this front angle to this back and not have this as tall, but I liked that it was taller. Because again, my style is not just cottage and artisanal and colonial. It's a little bit more towards the proto-industrial aspect of things. I'm really interested in that 1800s time period. So I like to have some of those influences present in my builds. But I think it's enough of the outside. Again, with all my buildings, you can make it whatever shape you want. It's the logic being applied that you would need to replicate, not the design itself. And so the leather process in this game is, like I said before, simplified to vegetable tanning. And I'll let you take a gander here in the ceiling. It is kind of flat and boring, but again, I had to figure out something to go up at an angle here. And I do have the bricks going through still. I'm not quite sure if I'm happy with that, but I think it works. Again, most of the attention is not drawn to the ceiling. Most of your attention is down here. So as long as you don't look too closely at it, I don't get too bothered by it. But I did make some compromises in here. One, from time, and two, effort. Because like it wouldn't take me very long, but I'm just I'm lazy, I guess. I don't know what to tell you. But again, talking like we're using vegetable tanning, I guess, is the process that we're using here. And a lot of this historically was very, very dirty. Like it was done in like they would just dig a hole in the ground, and like there's a lot of guts, and sometimes they'd use urine and all kinds of other stuff like in this process. It's very messy and odorous, and nobody really wanted it around where they were like doing their stuff. So tanneries, and this is technically a beam shop and a tannery kind of rolled into one. I called it a Leatherworks, but leatherworking is like actually working with the leather. What we're doing here in this building, and what you kind of do in the game, like in-game process, that is a simulation, a facsimile of leatherworking or leather making, leather crafting, leather production. Now, pick your pick, man. Leave me alone. It's very simplified, and so they have it obviously being done in barrels and not holes in the ground, the way like we do pit kilns and things like that. But it's very odorous and it's very messy, and all this stuff we have combined in this one building. And it is in our industrial type part of the estate. It is farther away from where we live, which makes more sense because of how smelly and messy and vulgar this would be. But a lot of it was done in pits in the ground, and I kind of have that replicated here, where I have these barrels put into the ground, but I also have it more industrialized, more like what you'd see later into like the 17 and 1800s, when they started having barrels and drums and mineral processes, because that's when we started using, I think, chrome salts or something like that in leather production, which I think we utilize in the game here to make the sturdy leather. But we have to get steel to get access to the chromium to do that and everything. So that process is a little anachronistic because this is supposed to be like 13th, 14th century Europe. They technically wouldn't have that yet, even with their steel making. I don't think chrome salts are being used for leather working. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the process or the history behind it or the game mechanics that are being presented. So if you have any kind of correction to that, again, put it down in the comments. I love being corrected. It makes me smarter, better, faster, stronger, harder, longer, all the ers. So thank you in advance, I guess. But there's a little bit of anachronism to it. So I'm okay with having these built-in ground vats that I've chiseled so that way in like my lore, my logic here, it's easy to clean these things out and fill them up and keep the process going. You don't have a bunch of dirt or something getting in your tannin. It's a lot more industrialized. But I did want it tied to some artisanry, like that period of time, that gradient where it went from cottage industry to industrialization, where they're trying to basically fit factory machines into hovels, or they're taking these processes that used to be just like what the grandmas would do on the weekend, and then they're taking 32 peasants and putting them in a brick building and having them do that all day. Like that kind of stuff, that transition where like we just got done with slavery and we immediately started replacing that with these machines and then getting people to use these machines, and then people slowly became treated like machines in the modern day. So like this whole historical process of that time period, the Industrial Revolution, both of them really are super interesting historically to me. I guess it's because my mom took Tylenol when she was pregnant with me. But because of that, I heavily incorporate that idea, at least, into my builds. Not necessarily a one-to-one replication, because I don't do one-to-one copies. But you can see I just have hides hanging up from the ceiling, different pieces of leather, and like these are some kind of modern, like it's made out of metal, but it is the 9/9 framing of older windows, so there's a mix there. And then like that's rather industrial looking, and the heightened big room is all airy. This is bigger than what somebody's house would be. This is not a hovel where some hunter or some farmer is, you know, doing, like has built a farm, or not a farm, a barn where they can do their leather working so they can make a living. This looks more like this is an established, intending to be permanent process. This is a market becoming. This is an industry, a brand, a business, a practice. You know, it's not just something being done. It's not just a task. It's not just a job. This is a way of life for somebody. And so it's a little messy. There's stains on the floor. I have the different pelts on the ground, again, using in-game assets combined with the stuff that I've chiseled just to facilitate the visual cohesion between what you can do as a player and what the game gives you as a game. So mixing those two things together is a super useful way to decorate. And then again, I have these chiseled tool racks with the real tool racks, and then I have a water source in here again with the sink and this metal basin. It's kind of like it's just a metal tub that's been rolled up and put underneath where there's a water outlet. Not like it's an actual sink like you see in the house. And then on the back walls here, the vats have what looks like a pipe that can be used, and of course this would miss all the buckets. But the idea is that this is not 4 buckets in a trench coat. The idea is that this is these 4 buckets inside this hole that I've chiseled with these trap doors is to look like a single coherent vat. So this is how we fill up this vat, is what the logic there is. Maybe we're pumping stuff through after we make it out there. But then actually behind I have crates full of and a barrel full of the actual liquid. So we're constantly making the tannin and the lime water and the strong tannin and storing them in the crates and in the barrels inside and out and keeping buckets of them. I wish there was some other way to at least mass store liquids besides just having stacks of fucking buckets or rows and rows of barrels. Like give us like a bigger, like a ton, like the big ass barrel so I can have tannin in there. That would be a cool addition. And I do have trader assets from, I believe this is I have to adjust my mic here, I apologize. Also, another piece of feedback I need is on my sound and everything, because I keep moving the mic to different spots to try to find where the volume is best, and like I don't blow out the mic when I make the noises that I make, giggity. So any feedback on the technical front is also appreciated. But I have the survival goods trader assets right there in between them. And then like just some metal scaffolding in front of the actual barrel to make it look like it's not a barrel. And I also did this metal piece to make it look like maybe this slides out of the way so you can exchange the barrel. Like this is some kind of apparatus that we use to fill this up to make it easier. I don't know. It's a lot of what I keep calling the implication. There's stuff here, and basically you see enough things that look like something you're familiar with, and you should be able to piece together whatever the little narrative that I'm trying to show you is. Again, every time you build, beyond just your base survival needs, like a dirt hut with the barrel is a tannery, right? But because I'm also making a build and decorating it, I'm making it more extravagant, there's a lot of layers of stagecraft and storytelling happening. And so, like, I'm doing too much, basically. But I think it really makes the place pop. Again, is all this necessary? No. I don't even need to do what's in here that is, like, even just the vats. That would have been enough in here. I didn't need to do this stuff in the wall. But I did it. And I feel like there's just enough little pieces coming together to sell that, oh, these guys are kind of advanced. Like, this is definitely not medieval. Oh, they have a system here. It's repeatable. It's a process. It's consistent. And I don't know. That's like a big way of how I build. It's just thinking about what looks grounded, what looks believable, plausible. But that has to be wrapped around what is necessary for use as a game. Because, again, this is my survival world. I'm not building a historical representation of a tannery. I am taking the in-game mechanics and what I have to do as a player to survive, and then basically painting something that looks like a tannery or a beam shop or a leatherworks on top of the structure that the game requires of me. And so I just try to break that up and, you know, spice it up and decorate it in a way that's interesting. And it might not be everybody's aesthetic, but hopefully there's some things in here that you can take and, like, will inspire you to approach problems differently. What is all really being intelligent is just finding a way to solve problems. And so if you guys are able to take this stuff and apply it in your own way, your own creativity, to your own situation, I would like to see evidence of that. I'd like to see what you guys pull off, because one, when I see it, now I'll be inspired. And I like getting feedback, not even directly, like from you guys commenting, but seeing what you guys do and what other people do, and then using that to come up with the new solutions myself. There's all kinds of stuff that I encounter that is inspiring, I guess, to not sound too goofy, but like it is inspiring. Like somebody I keep recommending on YouTube, you should go check them out, is I'm not sure how the name is really pronounced, but I say C Zarls, maybe it's Zarls, but it's CZARLS. They do a lot of creative builds. Technically it looks like they could be done in survival, and they seem to be relatively survival friendly, except with like the room mechanics maybe, but they're historically grounded. It looks like they're looking at real buildings and then copying them into the game, and just looking at them do that and how they do the furniture and how they thematically tie their furniture they're chiseling into the building that they're copying is a really cool thing to observe. And if you're creative and you like learning from different people and everything, then you probably have something to gain from looking at their stuff as well. So if you get done here, I recommend you go check them out. I really do. They're really cool. But that's this room. I said, like, this stuff is chiseled into the wall, and because it's sticking into what is essentially the external wall, I was trying to combine those two words there, I had to put that other layer of brick outside to cover this up. And the same thing with over here, because, like, in real life, the farmers would, I guess, send their cattle, and the hunters would, you know, send their stuff to, like, the butcher, and then that stuff would get processed, and then the hides would be a waste material, I guess, from the process of gathering the meat and butchering it up. And then those hides would get sent to the tannery and the beam house and everything to be processed. And so in here is where we keep our salted hides. This is just like, there's nothing to show in here. It's just a fucking cellar made out of brick with a shelf I chiseled so I can fit all the different vessels and still walk around and access them. But you need these things close by, because in real life they'd be brought to you salted and dried, and maybe even rough. They might even be brought to you rough, and then you'd have to salt and dry them so that way they could be prepped to be put into the lime to break them up. And then after you put them in the lime is when you would take the soaked hide, and I guess in my build here you'd take it from there to out here, string it up, scrape all the stuff off of it and everything, and then we use the knife for in the game, and then after that you would put it into your different tannins. And because we're using, I don't know if it's because we're using vegetable tannin or if this is the same way with the other forms of leather making. But they do the tannins in stages. You would have some weaker tannins, and then it would get up to stronger. I don't know it's as dichotomic as weak and strong tannin. I'm pretty sure it was a gradual process. But sometimes these suckers would have to be stored up in a vat for like 2 years, depending on the material and how much and what leather, like what kind of leather you want at the end of it. But you'd go through this process and you keep making these things and be very messy and repetitive and monotonous and all this other stuff that's just gross on different levels. And then you would have like rough leather, which this game flies by a lot of it. But at that point, somebody would have to like apply oils and stuff to this rough leather and cut it to shape and then make it into an item that can be sold to other people as leather. And this leather would then be going to like your saddle makers and your the people who make like your armor straps, the cobbler, the dude who makes shoes. And that would be a whole economy and market and business inside a village. And so that's something I want to explore when we do our creative village build over there, where we're going to put our traders and everything. I think that'd be cool to have the different, like even though this process typically only happens in a barrel in the game, I have taken it and broken it out into larger stages visually in the game world for this building. But I've also, at the same time, while expanding out the crafting process from the game, have condensed the actual production chain logic of the real world. Because in real life, a lot of the stuff that's happening inside this one building would be being done by different people at different buildings who have different professions. And so, although I have put the huge production chain into just one building, you could technically break all this up yourself into different buildings and get an even bigger build out of the same production chain, out of the same logic that I'm following here. You could have it set where there's a bunch of these racks where people are tanning hides or scraping hides en masse, and have that just be a building, just like a scrapery. I don't know if you'd call it, but I think it'd be the tannery, actually. Beamhouse? I'm actually not sure which one that is. I'm going to have to refresh myself on the leatherworking process. But if you guys happen to know the individual stages and processes and you want to nerd out, please feel free to nerd out down in my comments. I love that shit. I have done a little bit of leatherworking myself, but I have leather from like cows and stuff already given to me ready to be worked with. So I'm not really sure what the back end of that all exactly is. I just know a little bit about it. So the leather working in this game is really condensed. I have uncondensed it a little bit to make a building out of it, but what essentially I'm getting at is I've also compressed the real life process myself, and so you could expand that out and you can have your own cobbler shop where shoes are made, and that could just be a place where in game your tailor for your settlement or I don't know, village or base or civilization, whatever game you're playing for this in this game, because there's roleplay servers and stuff. Your tailor class guy could just work at the cobbler shop, and that could just be where he makes clothes and stuff, and you just have it set up to make it look like leather is brought there. Like I said, you can have a place where it looks like they just scrape the hides. You can have a much bigger place where it looks like they're making the tannin. And like I have logs and stuff stored up back here, but you could chisel piles of bark or stacks of sticks and stuff like that to make it look like it's more of an industrialized or spread out process. Everybody needs shoes. So leatherworking is something that should be scaled up to meet needs. Now there's just me and my wife here, and we're just an estate, so I didn't feel the need to have a cobbler, a courier, a saddle maker, and all this other stuff. We have a building where once our farms do their stuff and they've harvested the animals' hides, the hides are brought here, salted, stored, and then ultimately converted into various forms of leather that we need for the various crafting recipes. And some of that leather stays here just to be used in crafting, and some of it goes over to workshops and stuff where we keep nails and other things that we can craft the things that the leather requires. And with the new armor update supposedly going, I bet there's going to be some changes to clothing, and I bet there's going to be a lot more uses for leather as well. Plus, with the way I play the game, somebody has asked about this before, I use creative. So I get the creative leather blocks because I think you should be able to chisel leather onto things. So I will steal the creative leather block and use that to make like the cushion on this bench here. And because I've done that, I have to justify that to myself. So that means I have to make however much leather I think a block of leather would be. And so there's a reason for me to keep making more leather than what we have any right to make, because we're not using leather armor anymore ourselves. We've moved on to the tailored gambeson armor. So although leather is not in as high of demand, this is evidence that it used to be. And we do try to still keep it that way, because a lot of the way I play the game requires leather just to justify it to myself. But I think that's really it for the build. I feel like I've covered all the things. We've talked about color, we've talked about design, layout, we've talked about trench coating. We've even got breaking up the grid over here with how I've triggered all these things in this corner. And you can see that there's other aspects that also, break up the grid out and around here. So feel free to pause the video. Take screenshots if you need to. Just look at whatever is useful and use it. I just like to lay things out in stages. Like I said, it doesn't really have to make literal sense in how it would be done in real life. You just have to have evidence that there's things happening here. So kind of the same process as what you would see in my construction build video. You wouldn't be pouring the footer at the same time you're framing the roof. But because I'm showing the footer being poured and the roof being framed at the same time, it looks like stuff is being done. And that kind of narrative storytelling is something you should try to incorporate into your builds. So I have my vats are trench coated. I have stains on the floor. You can see that there's a soaked hide. You can see that there's hides hanging up. And you can see I also have pieces of leather and brown cloth, which looks like more refined leather or something maybe. And I have them stacked up, and I have the storage here. These need to be replaced with cabinets. But all this stuff just looks like there's a process. And the process is happening in this building. And so the process was the reason for the building. And the process also inspired what kind of decoration should be here. What kind of tools need to be chiseled. What kind of signs need to go on the wall. What needs to hang from the ceiling. What kind of color should we use. And you should just be asking yourself questions constantly while you're doing a build. And as you answer those questions, the build itself should unfold before you. And don't be afraid to learn and go back and change things. And also don't be afraid to keep things that you've learned, like that you've moved on from. Don't be afraid to keep those around as a reminder, like an evidence of your growth. And that's a pretty cool feature too. You can see how things change across an area of builds as you grow, because you solve problems that you encounter that you haven't encountered before, or you take in media that you haven't watched before, or you go places that you haven't gone before, and that expands your horizons. And so your newer builds, I feel like you should be constantly better in some way. Now there is that kind of artistic Dunning-Kruger like effect. I don't know what the name of it is, but if you improve to a certain degree, you might think your stuff looks worse than what the other things look like at the time. And that effect is because you now know more. You know what kind of mistakes and errors to look for. And so you're going to be more critical of your stuff. So there might be some kind of drop in your perceived improvement, but I promise, the more you build, the more you do, the more you watch, the more you observe, the more you learn, the better you will get. Just keep doing it. Practice will never make perfect, but there's no reason to stop practicing. You'll just get better and better. And and I think it'd be horrible if you could practice enough that you get perfect. To be done learning, to be done experimenting, to be done growing, that sounds like a tragedy to me. So in my opinion, you should just go out there and do it. Don't be scared. If you have to, go into creative. If you have to, buy the game for your friend and enlist them and make them help you. Group effort really goes a long way in this game. If I did not have my wife being such a good sport and a team player, and having an interest in this game and wanting to play it with me in the first place, I would probably not be able to accomplish a lot of this. So again, honey, thank you. I love you. Hope you have a good day at work. And everybody else, I also love you. Not as intimately, but maybe we'll get there. Maybe we should go to dinner sometime. Hit me up. But everybody else, I love you. You're all fantastic. All the feedback and every caliber has been greatly appreciated. You are all wonderful, creative, intelligent people. And I love the feedback loop and interacting with you guys. And I love having another reason to build cool stuff and make it pretty and show it off to you. Because I could just do a bunch of wood huts and be fine. But I know that I'm trying to impress you guys. I know I want to show this off to you. So every time I think I'm going to cut corners, I don't. I treat it like a Wendy's burger. I keep that shit square. However, you should always try to break up the square when you're playing this game. Break up the grid. Think outside the block. Really does go a long way. I hope this rambling has been to the point in enough areas that you guys can find something useful, and I hope it has been interesting. And if you've learned something, awesome. If there's something you can teach me, even more awesome. Please educate me down in the comments. Leatherworking, building tips, tricks, whatever you got. I love to learn. Until next time, and in the meantime, stay alive, stay happy.